Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into a really interesting bit of source material. It's an excerpt from a metabolic education video. And we're zooming in on, well, the forgotten macro, amino acids. We spend so much time talking carbs, fats. But the core lesson here seems to be that amino acids, the body plays by a completely different set of rules, much tougher rules.
That's exactly right. Our goal today, really, is to understand why amino acid metabolism isn't just like another chapter. It's almost a separate book, governed by what we're kind of calling metabolic martial law. We're tackling that big question. How does the body handle nitrogen?
Yeah.
It's critical, yeah, but also potentially dangerous.
And the key insight, the thing that jumps out, is that amino acids have this one big structural quirk, and it forces the body into this immediate, mandatory, and pretty costly cleanup job. Every single time. It's complex, you can't skip it, and it's all tied to toxicity. Okay, so let's start right there, the structural difference. What makes amino acids the odd one out compared to, say, glucose or fatty acids?
Yeah, it really boils down to one element, nitrogen. Amino acids are basically the only major thing we eat that has nitrogen built into its structure. Now, nitrogen's vital. We need it to build stuff, but it's also the source of this. Well, metabolic emergency. When the body decides to break down an amino acid, maybe for energy, it first has to rip off that nitrogen group.
Okay, ripping off the nitrogen. And what's the unavoidable result of doing that?
It turns into ammonia.
Mm-hmm.
Invariably. And here's the emergency part.
Huh?
The source material really stresses that ammonia is highly neurotoxic. We're talking something that, if it builds up even a little bit, it can cause serious problems.
Yeah.
Especially in the brain, the central nervous system. This isn't just about being inefficient. It's like an actual poison hazard. Needs immediate handling.
Wow, okay. That really puts it into perspective. We're not just talking about storing a bit too much energy here. We're talking about a mandatory, immediate detox just to keep your brain working properly.
Precisely. The body can't just let ammonia float around, or just filter it out easily through the kidneys like that. It needs a complex, energy-intensive process to safely turn that toxin into something harmless, something it can get rid of.
Yeah.
It just highlights how big a challenge this single element poses.
Right. So if the body must deal with this excess nitrogen right away to protect the brain, what's the specific solution? What's the mechanism the source material points to?
That specific mechanism is the urea cycle. It's this essential, non-negotiable pathway. Its whole job is basically to trap that toxic ammonia and convert it into urea, which is much safer, and that can be passed out through the urine. It's a critical pathway. No bypass allowed.
That's amazing, isn't it? That the body dedicates an entire, like a metabolic factory, the urea cycle, just for the waste product of one type of molecule. It really underlines how unique amino acids are compared to fats and carbs. They just skip this whole industrial level cleanup.
It absolutely does. The fact this specialized high-cost cycle even exists just shows how serious the nitrogen problem is. This mandatory detox is basically the first rule of amino acid metabolism. Cleanup required.
Okay, so nitrogen dictates the cleanup. Got it. But amino acids have a second, equally weird rule, right? Something about storage, or rather, the lack of it.
Yeah, and this is where the difference becomes super clear, especially when you compare them to the fuels you're probably more familiar with. You almost think, given how energy-intensive the urea cycle is, the body would want to save the raw material, the amino acids, right? Keep them handy.
Exactly. Like, think about glucose. Big pasta dinner, right? Extra glucose, straight into storage, glycogen, muscles, liver. Ready to go when you need it fast.
Yep, efficient storage. And fat. Even easier. Excess fatty acids get packed up into tags triglycerides. That's our best, most dense energy storage. The body has these really elegant, large-scale ways to save energy for later.
But the core finding in our source material about amino acids, it's really stark, points to a major limitation.
It is. Get this. There is not a designated mechanism to store excess amino acids in the body. Period. The body just doesn't have an amino acid version of a glycogen shed or a fat vault.
Wow. Okay, that totally fits the script on how we might think about protein. If you can't save them up, they've got to be dealt with, like, right now. Used or processed immediately. It sort of implies protein intake is always this continuous moment-to-moment metabolic decision, not a strategic deposit.
That's the crucial takeaway for you, the listener. Because there's no storage buffer, any amino acids coming in have to be diverted immediately. They can't just hang around. Creates this real pressure for rapid use. So, okay, what are the two main places amino acids go right after absorption?
Well, the main reason we eat protein, I guess, is structural, building things.
That's use number one. and it accounts for, the vast majority. Amino acids are used right away to synthesize cellular proteins. Our body's constantly rebuilding, making enzymes, replacing bits, repairing tissues. That's the top priority. Structural stuff.
And then there's the second thing. It's critical, even if it's maybe a smaller amount. The source material says a significant, maybe not major, but definitely important amount of amino acids become precursors for specialized products.
Absolutely. This is where amino acids do way more than just build structures. They provide the nitrogen and carbon backbones for loads of really vital, high-priority molecules in the cell. Molecules that also need nitrogen.
Like what, for example, what kind of specialized things rely on that immediate amino acid supply?
Well, think about communication. Neurotransmitters, for instance. The chemicals our brain cells use to talk to each other. Huge reliance there. And, critically important, they're the building blocks for nucleotides. That's the stuff that makes up DNA and RNA, our genetic material, and also our energy currency, like ATP, GTP, CTP. You get the idea.
Huh. So basically, if some really important molecule in the cell needs nitrogen, chances are an amino acid is supplying it. It's like this mandatory pipeline for all the high-stakes nitrogen-containing machinery. Seems like the body's constantly sorting incoming amino acids based on urgency.
Precisely. They're essential for making stuff, but the supply has to be used for immediate needs, whether that's building proteins or making these specialized molecules.
Okay, so the body handles what it needs for proteins and specialized products. Makes sense. But we often eat way more protein than we need for just that, right?
Right.
Say after a big steak or a protein shake. What happens to the probably substantial amount of amino acids that aren't used in those two ways, the leftovers?
Right. Since storage is off the table, they go straight to mandatory catabolism, immediate breakdown. They simply cannot linger in the bloodstream. And this loops us right back to that dual challenge of amino acids.
Oh, because breaking them down immediately forces the nitrogen issue again. The molecule splits, right? Two distinct parts.
That's it. The first part is that nitrogen component. This inevitably forms ammonia, and it must be immediately detoxified through that high-cost mandatory urea cycle. You can't get the energy out without dealing with the toxic part first.
And the other half, the part without the nitrogen. The structural leftovers. What's that carbon structure called and where does it go?
That's what we call the carbon skeleton. Sometimes you'll hear it called a keto acid. This carbon frame is actually what the body's interested in when it breaks down excess protein for energy. That's where the usable energy is stored.
I see. So once that structure is cleaned of nitrogen, then the body can finally treat it like any other fuel, a kind of purified energy unit.
Exactly. Once detoxified, that carbon skeleton gets funneled straight into other existing metabolic pathways. The same ones used to process energy structures from glucose or fatty acids. It's used for immediate energy production. The key difference is just that mandatory, non-optional detox step that has to happen first.
So the metabolic rule is absolute then. Use it for structure, use it for special stuff, or burn it right away. But no matter what, that nitrogen part means mandatory cleanup. The system allows zero inventory and zero lingering toxins, it seems.
And that brings us right back to the two things that really define amino acid metabolism. They're unique because of that nitrogen, which forces the urea cycle to exist and run. And they're unique because there's just no way to store them. They're valuable resources, sure, but they come with a high processing cost and absolutely zero inventory space.
Yeah, it paints this picture of amino acid handling as being less about, like, maximizing energy efficiency and maybe more about containment and safety. You can't save them, and they're toxic if you don't deal with them immediately.
That is the essential insight here, yeah. And if we think about the implications for you, the listener, it kind of requires a shift in thinking. Because the body can't store amino acids, protein intake is less about making a big deposit in the bank for later, like fat reserves. It's more about ensuring a continuous cash flow to meet immediate demands, synthesis, energy, whatever is needed right now.
It really does sound like the body prioritizes managing toxicity over, say, long-term energy optimization when it comes to protein.
It seems that way. And this raises, I think, an interesting question for you to ponder. Since the body demands this continuous supply and must immediately run that energy-guzzling urea cycle on any excess, does this maybe suggest that burning excess protein is actually a surprisingly inefficient metabolic choice compared to burning carbs or fats? Even though the carbon skeleton itself gives energy, that energy cost of mandatory detoxification, that's like the hidden price tag of high protein intake you don't actually need for building.
A constant supply, a mandatory cleanup, and maybe a hidden inefficiency, a profound distinction between just getting energy and managing survival. Well, thank you for helping us deep dive into this very unique corner of how our bodies work.
Always a pleasure. This is fascinating stuff.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.